Okay, John, I'll let you
All
do
right,
your
here we
thing.
go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hi, I'm Jim Eskin, and on behalf of Eskin Fundraising Training, do you think number 30 is a lucky number? Well, this is the 30th nonprofit empowerment webinar series. This one is on a subject that's near and dear to all of us, and that's how to harness power of email marketing. And we have somebody who is on the planet good talking on that subject. But before I turn to him, and he's from a place I like, I'll turn to another person from a place I like and introduce our producer, John Largent, who's president of Game Day Media, and he's going to acquaint you just with a few logistical details and also how you can ask questions.
Thank you for joining this week's webinar. You're all on mute now, and we're in webinar mode. If you do have a question during the Q&A session, just raise your hand, and we will call on you to ask the question. We'll ask you to unmute your microphone so that you can ask the question. Or you can just type in your question down in the Q&A bubble at the bottom or top of your screen, depending on if you're a laptop or a pad or your phone, and we'll answer your questions that way. Thanks. Back to you, Jim.
Okay, thank you. And I am delighted he's going to get a fuller introduction, but he's going to get a quick introduction right now. I am unabashedly and unbiasedly a huge Constant Contact fan, and I'm going to share just a little. I'm doing what I'm doing now in partnership with Constant Contact. Dave Charest is their director of content marketing. He is from my neck of the woods in Methuen, Massachusetts. So I'd like to begin. How is your family, David, doing in Methuen?
Great, Jim. Thank you. And thank you again so much for having me here today. Yeah, everybody's doing pretty well. You know, we're grateful to be in a situation where we're all able to kind of work from home and school from home at the moment. And so everyone's healthy and doing well. Thank you for asking.
Well, too, that's great to hear. We have three objectives today. We like to think of the nonprofit professionals and volunteers and board members comprise our learning community. We want to help you learn how to get your email read. We want to learn how you can teach you how you can grow and segment your list. And finally, the bottom line is how you can nurture loyalty. I want to jump to a question that I think it was timely before COVID, and it's even more timely now. There's something like, and Dave, I'm going to pick on you early and often. There's something like an estimated 150,000 emails sent each and every minute. 150,000 emails. The average office worker receives about 120 emails daily. And I'm sure a lot of you get more than that. And so, Dave, as the wise one in Methuen, what are your suggestions? And I think there should be responsibilities for both the senders and recipients for managing what we call the email avalanche.
Sure. So, you know, I wish I could say that I am an email whiz in the sense of managing my own email. I actually have a pretty unruly inbox. And so I'm going to kind of flip it around a little bit, right? I think what that does is really highlight the importance of the sender and really thinking about, one, what you're dealing with in terms of, you know, you're competing against all of these other messages that are happening throughout the day, as you're mentioning, but also the importance of what I'm sure we'll talk a lot about here today is, you know, one, being recognizable in the inbox and being something that people actually want to receive. Because I know, and I'm sure the same for many people on the line, is when you're, you know, you wake up in the morning, you log in, you check your inbox, and you're doing that, you're starting to process those things, right? And you're quickly looking and saying, okay, I'm going to read this, I'm going to move this, I'm going to delete that. You're processing this stuff very quickly. And so that time frame in the inbox there is really important. And you know, your people knowing who you are and wanting to read those messages from you is oftentimes the big deciding factor.
Very good. And we got a lot more questions for you. First of all, folks, I got to tell you, I know Constant Contact close up. I started a print newsletter in the ancient year of 1996. And then my wife told me about Constant Contact in the summer of 2009. And we've been sending out a monthly newsletter through Constant Contact. And I have to tell you, I need help. Their customer support team is incredible. I call and they never make me feel dumb. So everybody else does. And they always get something resolved. And I'll tell you, even during this period, Dave, thank you. Your customer service reps are second to none. And by the way, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing because I started a newsletter in 2009 and took Dave's advice and started to grow and segment a list. You always dream of doing something that you're not. And for that, after working for 3 higher education institutions, was teaching people, nonprofit volunteers and professionals about the art and science of fundraising. And your invitation and event management system allows myself, my wife Andrea, and our 2 cats to make a good show of it. And everybody that's listening, you get Constant Contact invitations. You respond through their event management system. We follow up with you. I think too, I really appreciate the way that Constant Contact works with the little people.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And we appreciate you being a customer. And yeah, you're right. We have a really fantastic customer support team out there. So it's great to hear that. So thank you.
Well, we have in our audience, again, a mix of nonprofit executive directors, directors of development, board chairs, board members, volunteers, donors. And Dave, I'm unabashedly a big, big fan of the nonprofit sector because I think it's true that nonprofits, I don't care what your mission is, you bring out the best in people. This is a historic or a conundrum, if I pronounced that correctly, a moment that nonprofits are finding their needs rising at the same time their governmental and private resources are being challenged. Mm-hmm. And we like to say that nonprofits are no stranger to financial pressures. Every executive director I know knows how to stretch a nickel into a dime, but guess what? Now they got to stretch it into a quarter. And this is a tough time. We are no stranger to the tough times, but the truth is, I don't care if you're in the largest organization or the smallest, the truth we share is there's a lot more that we don't know about the future than we do know. And a little point of background, there's 1.5 million nonprofits across the country. There's 100,000 in Texas. There's 6,000 in San Antonio. I think I once researched it. I think the Bay State has something like 25,000 nonprofits. So Bay State's Massachusetts, by the way. No, most nonprofits are small in size. As you see from the graphic here, the overwhelming majority have annual revenues of under $500,000. But before you think, being small has advantages. You can make decisions and use this word pivot. And you should take advantage of that. We're in a very, very fluid environment. And I know you rather have a big staff and all those resources, but you also have the power of making decisions very quickly and acting on those decisions. This shows you, last year, $450 billion was given to American philanthropy. And basically, who gets that money hasn't changed over the 60 years we've tracked it. Religion has always been the biggest chunk, followed by education. Then it's really broken down after that. And what we admire about, again, I don't care if you're executive director, you're the secretary, the newest member of the board. We love nonprofit people because each and every day and what you do and your mission, you remind us that one person can make a difference. And when nonprofits do well, guess what? We all do well because nonprofits touch, improve, and save more lives. And we have a little tradition. We like to say that nonprofits before COVID were essential, and now they are more essential than ever. So we like all of you to type in the 3 words nonprofit strong, because that's what we are. We're a sector or nonprofit strong. Dave, what are we?
Nonprofit strong.
Okay, you're 1 for 1. And another theme that we're stressing is that we're in this together. We like to think of our audience today as a learning community. We can grow, share, and we think if there was ever a time for collaboration, that time is now. And because when you collaborate, everybody wins. Okay. I said that I had the pleasure of working for 3 higher education institutions in San Antonio over 25 years and their advancement. And I worked with these wonderfully successful and courageous business community and community leaders. And Dave, they were fearless in everything they could do except asking for a gift. And I think, what do we know about fear? It's basically based on fear of the unknown. And so June of 2018, Andrea and I launched Eskin Fundraising Training, and we have declared war on fear of asking for a gift. And we like to think, most people I know in nonprofits, they bring to the table the Jeffersonian virtues of a knowing head and an honest heart. And we think you can take any of you, give you a little training, and we can make you a very effective fundraiser. We have a busy schedule. We're going to be doing webinars every Wednesday from 4 to 5 p.m. Central Time, with one exception. We decided that the day after the election, America's attention is going to be too distracted, so we're going to skip November 4th. But we are doing the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. We got a feeling that a lot more people are going to be home. And we want to make sure our special guest is going to emphasize the importance of putting the reader in control. So we like to have you sign up for our newsletter, and we're going to send you the slides recording, and it'll be a PDF. And if you're not on our newsletter list, you can click there and you can opt in, and that will get you invited to all these webinars, which are free. I was proud last year to publish my first book, 10 Simple Fundraising Lessons. And it's amazing how much has changed in that 1 year. Everything we knew about fundraising, you did it face to face, particularly for big gifts. Your chances are much bigger. And it was eyeball to the eyeball. But guess what? Fundraising, I like to say, has entered a new frontier. And the parts of it are still the same, Dave. You know, you have to identify prospects. You got to forge a personal, emotional relationship between them and your mission. You have to set the stage for the solicitation and then thank them. But except now we got to do that virtually. And we're going to talk about how email marketing can buttress the efforts of nonprofits. At this point now, I'll give them all of a 2-sentence introduction. I'd like to bring in Dave Charest, who's been, 9 years, has been Director of Content Marketing with Constant Contact. Again, I'm not unbiased, and I've actually visited their offices in Waltham, but I believe he's in Burlington.
Correct.
And you've been in the related business for about 14 years, and I'm originally from Boston, so I know he lives a little north of it in Methuen, Massachusetts. And yep. I want, first of all, thank you again for what Constant Contact does for the nonprofit sector and empowering them to be better at what they do. And thank you for the most precious gift of all, your time. Yeah, so, Dave, would you say we can get started? We got lots of questions, and this is going to be completely organic. I'm telling Dave, if you need to take care of a question in 1 minute, you got 1 minute. If you need 3 minutes, you'll take 3 minutes. John and Michael, around 35 after, we want to check if we have some audience questions, and we'll move those in. We'll continue the Q&A between Dave and I, and then we're going to do a feature I call Jim's Wrap Up. So, Dave, are you ready for some questions?
I'm ready.
Okay, well, again, no easy questions, okay? You know, it was pretty serious before the COVID era, and now computer screen fatigue It's at record levels. And so here's the easy question, Dave. How do nonprofits find that sweet spot of sending enough email but not too much?
Yeah, great. So great question, Jim. And again, before I answer that, again, thank you for having me here today. And a big thank you to everyone here watching and participating today. I know you have lots of choices in terms of where to spend your time. So I appreciate you spending some time here with us. And I hope I can provide some value as you're here today. But so to answer your question, right, how do you find that balance between sending not enough or too much email? And interestingly, the answer is, which everybody is going to hate, but it depends, right? And so it really depends on.
You would make a very good politician, Dave.
Yeah, well, there we go. So, but it really does, right? Because it depends on who is that audience that you're trying to reach. And really it depends on what the nature of your nonprofit is, right? And I think what it boils down to is really setting expectations with your subscribers or the contacts that are on your list. And that could mean, for example, if you were to sign up for a list and that the person asking you to sign up said, I'm going to send you an email every day, right? My expectation at that point, if I do sign up, is that I'm going to get an email from you every day, right? So if you don't send an email every day, well, then that's not enough email that you're sending to me because you set the expectation, right? So, you got to think about it from that sense, like what is the expectation? And I think the other thing, particularly in the nonprofit space, right? Things change, things come up, and you have some things that have more importance than others at particular times. And so really before you send anything, it's not just about the email, it's about, is this message I'm going to send, that question you should be asking is it necessary for the reader, right? That contact that you're sending something to, you might want to send something to get the word out, but if the person on the other end doesn't care about that, well, then it's falling on deaf ears, right? And so I think that's really where you start to strike the balance. I can give you a personal story. So I spent some time. So as Jim mentioned, I'm originally from Massachusetts, and I lived in New York for about 15 years before I came back to this area. And during that time, I worked for a nonprofit theater out in Astoria. So the Astoria Performing Arts Center. And one of the things that we had set was the expectation that we are going to email you once a month, at least, right? Once a month. But then when we'd have shows coming up or special events coming up, we would actually send a message out in our regular monthly message to say, hey, during this time, we're actually going to start sending to you a little bit more frequently, right? So we're setting that expectation that we were now going to send to you. And at that point, we would send once a week, leading up to those events or to those shows. And so we let people know that, hey, this is what we're going to do. So like people didn't feel like, oh, now you're sending too much to me. We're like, no, just during this period of time while we have this thing going on, we're going to send a little bit more frequently to you. And so I think that's really the big thing, is setting that expectation with people so that they're aware of what they should be expecting.
Maybe this falls on this. You can write the greatest email that's ever been written in the course of time, but how do you get people to open your email, Dave?
So, getting people to open and read the email, it comes down to a few things, I think. I think one is those collection practices, right? So I mentioned that before. You need to put people in control of saying, yes, raising their hand, I want to receive the emails that you're going to send. And so when they do that, there's something that happens, right? Where you put somebody in the act of actually entering in their email address or taking the time to send it off or say yes or submit it, is actually them saying, yeah, I want to hear from you. And so they're going to be more interested in receiving that email. They are, versus just adding people to your list or just sending it to people who haven't said explicitly, yes, they want to, right? So that's the first thing. You're going to increase your chances of people opening those emails just by doing that. I think the second thing is you need to make sure that you're using a from name that people are going to recognize. And that could be a combination of things. But the importance of that, I mentioned how you kind of start to process your email and you start to do that really quickly. And so one of the first things, or the most impactful thing in determining whether or not somebody is going to open your email, is if they know who it's from, right? And so you're scanning that inbox quickly. You're saying, okay, who is this from? Oh, I know who that person is. And then you're looking at the subject line and you're saying like, okay, am I interested in what that is saying to me? Okay, great. I'm going to open that email, right? And so you're doing this very quickly. And so if you're receiving an email and you don't recognize who it's from, you kind of cause the stumble where somebody's like, what is this? I don't know what that is. And they're going to bypass it, right? So I think that's the second thing. The third thing, of course, is then, giving people a reason to open the email by, making a very clear subject line. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about those a little later, but, give me a reason to why I want to open the email, right? And then fourth, I think you need to make sure that you're making it easy to consume. So, and this is really kind of like over the course of time, as people recognize your emails coming in, they open them, they start to enjoy and look forward to receiving those because they know what's going to be inside and that you're going to be respectful of their time and giving them information that's pertinent to them and doing all of those things. So I think it's a combination of those four things that really help you get your emails kind of open and read.
I kind of like teach that fundraising is a combination of common sense and common courtesy. And it sounds like really email protocol can follow the same handlebars. No easy questions, Dave. Sorry. What are the keys on producing content that you could say is consistent, it's cohesive, and it's reinforcing messages?
Gotcha. So, well, first and foremost, you really need to be clear on that story that you're trying to tell, right? I think, secondly, you want to be realistic about what you're going to be able to maintain, because, consistent is a key word that you said in there that I think is really important just in any form of marketing, whether you're a small business or whether you're a nonprofit. That consistency is key. And so in order to be consistent, you have to be able to do things that you can consistently maintain, right? So I think that's being realistic about what you can do is important there. And then I think thirdly, just make sure you're doing things and sending messages that, you are supporting that story that you're trying to tell all the time. Again, I'll go back to the theater. We were, if we had a tagline for the theater, it would be adventurous theater in Astoria. And so anytime we were sending messages and anytime we were doing something in the stories that we're telling, we're really trying to support that, right? And that came down to, the season we decided to create based on the shows that we chose, right? They were things that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see. And our theater was, within a local church is where we actually put on those productions. And these were like Broadway caliber productions inside an auditorium, right? And we would make choices that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see in that space. And so when we were telling those stories and we were sharing why we made those decisions and, getting the people that were involved with the productions and how they were creating those things, was all kind of to support that idea that you're coming to this theater and you're supporting this theater because we're bringing you things that are a little bit adventurous and things that you wouldn't typically see or expect from an off-Broadway theater.
Hey, do you feel there are any major differences in the way that nonprofits should use email marketing than for-profits?
That's a good question. So I actually think there's a lot that small businesses should, learn from nonprofits in terms of thinking beyond just like transactional emails and just like these buy, right? I guess the equivalent you could say is donate, right? But I think there's something to the idea of really telling stories. I think they both camps are going to, benefit from, and then building those connections, right? We do business with people we know, like, and trust. We contribute to organizations we know, like, and trust. It's all about doing that.
Hey, that's my line. Give me a fist bump on that. Give me a fist bump there and fluent, because I know, like, trust. So I think that's our aim. Okay, and it's your microphone at this time.
But I mean, I think the other thing to think about too is that, many nonprofits have a business side to them, right? An example I'll give is we have a customer, Whole Latte Love Cafe. And so they are a cafe in one instance, but they're also raising funds for the work that they're trying to do, right? And so you have to marry the asking for donations and volunteers and people helping out the organization and the cause that they're fighting for, but also they need to get people to come to the shop and buy stuff, right? And so you're oftentimes in a place where nonprofits have kind of the two sides of the coin. And so I think, you know, just to sum up that, really both sides of that should be telling stories, should be trying to build relationships, and trying to drive people to taking some type of action.
Okay, we hinted at this question a little earlier. Subject headers are crucial. So what's your advice on a sound subject header?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I think the big thing to think about is maybe first that you want to try to keep it short. We often recommend like 4 to 7 words. And of course, there are always these, I guess anything I'm saying here to you, as I mentioned earlier, right? I said it depends. It really depends on, you know, what you're doing. And the goal should really be to take these suggestions that I'm giving you or Jim's giving you, and we're basing it off what we've seen work for other people. But your audience and your business or your nonprofit is always going to be different, right? And so you use those things as a place to start, but then you make adjustments based on what you actually see happening. And so we typically say keep it short, right? 4 to 7 words, but there are always, you know, times you want to break the rules. But the reason we say that is because oftentimes, right, again, you're scanning your inbox, you're trying to make those decisions, particularly everybody's got, you know, the mobile device with them now, right? And you don't have a lot of real estate, although they're getting bigger and bigger, you still have limited space onto what you're actually going to see as you're scrolling through those emails you decide to open. And so, you know, try to keep it short. 4 to 7 words is what we recommend. Some other things that you can think about doing is, you know, be bold in what you're saying in those subject lines, right? You know, example would be like, you know, never underestimate your impact, right? Could be a subject line that you might want to use. You know, personalize those emails, those subject lines if you can. I think that comes from one, adding somebody's name into the subject line if that fits. You don't want to do that too often because it can become an overused trick, for lack of a better term, if you start to think about that. But it could be as specific as saying, like, here are the results from your donation, right? So you're making it about what they did, right? So we love to hear about ourselves. And so I think the more you can do to make it about them is always going to put you in a better position. I think you can also think about asking questions. There's something built in with asking a question. And if it's intriguing and captivating enough, right, we want to try to, our brain stretches and wants to answer that question. And so, you know, example there, like, you know, want to see a child smile, right? Something like that, you know, points to your mission and what you're trying to do. And again, using emotion, I think, are also other ways to start to get people to make those stand out. An example there would maybe be like, take 5 minutes to fight hunger, or do something like that. And then also just be sincere. You know, like, we can't thank you enough would be like maybe an example there of something that you can do. And I think, you know, those are some examples of things that you can do to write strong subject lines. I think the default thing that I'd love everybody to think about is, tell me what's in the email, right? Because again, we're practical in the sense of how we're trying to process the information we have in our inboxes. And so if I say, all right, this is from an organization I like, all right, this email is about this, and when I open it up, I expect it to be about that, like, that's helping me make a decision. And sometimes when you're stuck, just go back to that fundamental and you'll probably be okay.
Thanks. Dave, we were talking earlier how the practice and mechanics of fundraising have been turned upside down. I mean, for 30 years, I was taught, and I taught that major gifts were solicited face to face. And now all of a sudden we have social distancing and we're having some asks being made virtually. Guess what? We're seeing there is some strong responses. It can be done. But the question I'll put to you is, how can a nonprofit use email marketing to support its virtual solicitations?
Yeah. Well, you know, I think one of the most important things is, I mean, clearly, yes, right, you can send emails asking for donations and telling these stories, all important things. But I also think you mentioned the face-to-face piece of it, and I can remember our executive director at Astoria Performing Arts Center, right? She has all of these personal relationships with people. And I think it's a combination of those, using those personal relationships and those personal contacts that you have with people, and the email marketing piece of it, right? Because those relationships are really key. And so, imagine having a conversation with somebody, maybe you've talked to them on the phone and you're speaking with them, and say like, hey, be on the lookout for an email. We have something coming out a little later, right? So you're letting people know that this thing is coming, and it'll be an opportunity for you to donate or do something, or participate or do something, or even just sending a personal email where you're just connecting with somebody and you're letting them know. You're almost teasing the idea of that, like, hey, we've got something really cool coming in the marketing, email that's coming up. And so you're able to start to build, it's not face-to-face, but you're able to kind of build that personal relationship and keep that relationship warm, while turning them on to what it is that you're going to be doing from a marketing perspective.
Okay, thank you. Hey, let's move on to another blocking and tackling type of question.
Sure.
What is your advice on how long a nonprofit's email message should be?
So it's a great question. My answer is always as long as it needs to be.
Hey, I thought you were going to say it depends.
Well, I'll get to it, but right. So a lot of people think that, like, we'll often say that like less is better. And I think that is true, but not in the way that you might think. I think less is better in the sense of ideas and what you're trying to communicate in the message, right? And so if you have, for example, even 3 things, but you have 4 or 5 things you're trying to communicate in a message, it's difficult for people to know what to take from that or know what to do from that, right? And so really what you want to think about is, what is the one idea or the one thing somebody can take action on within a particular message? And then your email can actually be as long as you need it to be to convince somebody to take that action that you want them to take. The big key here too is with the content that you're putting in the email. Content and reading on a digital device is a lot different from reading a book or a paper newsletter or something like that. And so we tend to, when we're reading online, we tend to scan things before we actually invest in reading them fully. And so you really want to make sure that you're making the content inviting for someone to read, and you want it to feel like less intimidating, right? And so there's a big difference between a big block of text, right, where you have a lot of information in there and saying, read this, versus saying, hi, Jim, how are you today? And then leaving some space. I have some information I wanted to share, right? You start to kind of, oh, okay, I can look at that and it looks a little bit more inviting, right? That people will be able to consume that a little bit better. So I think that's the other piece to think about. And so really the answer is, it depends on what it is that you're trying to do, right? But make sure that you're only including information that is going to help somebody make that decision on doing the thing that you want them to do.
Sure. Hey, before we move to the audience, I got a couple more questions.
Sure.
Again, this is just getting down to the blocking and tackling. So what's your suggestions to nonprofits on making effective use of photos and graphics?
Yeah, so this is a great one. I think what's important here to think about is that obviously, right, the saying is, right, a picture is worth 1,000 words. But a picture can, or an image can also be wasted if it doesn't support the message. And I think you don't want to just have them there for ornamental reasons. All right, just don't have an image to have an image. Have an image because it supports the message that you're trying to get across. Use those images to invoke an emotion in somebody, and then use graphics to simplify what it is that you're trying to convey and make your case more impactful. I think that's really where the power comes from, those images that you're using.
And by the way, I'm going to change the order, but every time I get to schedule my constant contact message, there's a recommendation, be safe for later. We recommend so-and-so date and so-and-so time. And so how do you all know when is the best time to send an email? And in addition to the it depends.
Right. So the it depends part is obviously it's based on your audience. And so, you know, audience for nonprofit A is going to be different for audience nonprofit B. And really what you're looking for is, you know, what we're looking at to make those recommendations is typically across like an average, right? And so where we may, you know, we've stopped making that recommendation just because it is so different based on those audiences. And so we'll look at things across, you know, you can say in general, right? Like maybe Tuesdays at a particular time are okay. But again, that's a place to start. And so what you should really be thinking about when you're thinking about the times is as you're sending, dig into your reports, look at the people who are opening your emails, and then you can actually, in your constant contact account, you can sort that by times that was opened. And then you can actually get a sense of seeing when most of those emails are opened. And typically those emails, you know, most emails are opened within the first 48 hours. And so I would say give it that time to look and see. And then you can start making adjustments, say like, oh, most people open this on, you know, 3 o'clock on Tuesday. Well, then I'm going to try to send more frequently at that time. And so I think it's really digging in and looking at and looking at the reports and looking at what's happening with your particular audience is going to guide you. But, you know, a couple of things to just think about just in terms of like open rates and click rates too, just to give people some place to start in terms of a gauge, right? Right now for nonprofits, according to the information that we have, the average open rates for an email are around 20.57%. And the click rates are at 8.82%. And that's what's happening as of, I believe, September of this year. And so, right, again, that's a good gauge for you and to say, okay, am I doing better or worse than that? And then at that point, once you figure out where you are, what you're trying to do is you're really worried about what your open and click rates are and how can you beat those moving forward, right? And so I think that's an important distinction to make there as well.
Let's move a little to the world of building your list, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things you love emphasizing is segmentation. Could you explain what segmentation might mean to the nonprofit community?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, just in its basic terms, right? Grouping like contacts together so that you can send them more relevant messages so to the right people at the right times, really, right? And so if you think about the people that are involved with your nonprofit, you know, you're going to have a board, you're going to have volunteers, you're going to have staff, you're going to have, you know, people that donate, you know, just to name a few at the top, right? But you might have other things going on as well. You might have local businesses that you partner with. You might, you know, the list goes on and on. Every one of those audiences are different and they don't need to know everything that's going on with your nonprofit, nor do they care about everything that's going on with your nonprofit, to be frank, right? And so each of those groups of people deserve to get information that's relevant to them from you.
Hey, could you do me a favor? Repeat that. I think
those people deserve to get relevant information from you, right? So you do that by segmenting your lists and not treating every contact the same.
Okay, let's go. Hey, John, do we have any questions queued up from the audience? I got plenty more ready for Dave. If we want to check on the audience.
You guys must be doing an amazing job because there's no questions right now.
Okay. Well,
actually, we just got a question pop up from Gene. Hold on, let me pull him up.
Okay, Gene, and I think I know who this Gene is. Gene, welcome back. You are a Charest member. By the way, you know, Gene, Dave is from Methuen and Gene is from Weston. So we got three base staters.
There you go.
Three base staters. And Gene, how are you doing today?
Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah. Hi, Dave. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Gene. How are you?
John. Okay. Question is, our website for our nonprofit, the Bowen Center for Neighborhood Advocacy, is on wix.com, wix.com. I mean, that's the provider. That's the framework we're on. And they have a email, function.
Mhm.
They call it a send. And so, we use that. But I'm wondering, because sometimes I don't know, I think we're not getting enough openings, and we're not, the last time, to me, it's a little hard. Like I asked our guy, well, how do I find the list? I want to look at the list,
Yeah.
I go here, there, blah, blah, blah. Well, anyway, I guess the question in essence is, would we be better off doing constant contact and, scrap the built-in email blast?
Mhm.
What do you think?
By the way,
So,
Dave, you're going to speak as an unbiased source.
Yeah.
oh, of course, yeah. So, well, so a couple of things. I'll let you know, Gene. One, that so I'm not going to say the name of the competitor that you're using because you've said it for everybody. So thank you. But Constant Contact has a website builder as well. Now that's one of the newer tools that we have that integrates with our email marketing and all of that. So if you were ever looking for that, there's another option there. But I will say, just in general, right, because email marketing is the bread and butter of what we've been in business doing, for 20 years or so, it is much more robust in terms of like what you're going to get than what those built-in things offer you, regardless of the platform. The good news is, though, that if you didn't want to use your website or change your website or do anything, that like we provide you tools to insert those forms and sign up forms, along with other tools and ways for you to collect email addresses right within whatever existing website that you're using. And so if somebody uses that form, their contact information gets added directly to your Constant Contact account. And then that allows you to send those messages and get reporting and, keep track of who those contacts are and see those different lists of people and segment and all of that. And so you're getting what I would guess, I'm not familiar with what the particular offering is there on what you're using now, but I would hazard a guess that it's a much more robust a tool to use than what you're currently using. And I'm sure Jim could walk you through it at another time.
Okay, well,
Good question.
that's interesting. Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. And John, anybody else, or I'm going to go back. Any other questions from the audience? And they can come in later. I have a couple more questions for Dave, and then we can kind of do a wrap up. Okay.
From the audience right now.
First of all, Dave, under any circumstances, should it be permissible for a nonprofit to share its list?
No. The short answer is no. I'll explain a little bit more why. But so think of it like this, right? Somebody's email address is almost like them sharing a secret with you, right? They're giving you something that gives you access to them in a very personal piece of data way, right? There's lots of talk about data right now and personal information. And so they're entrusting you with that. And so you should never give it to someone else. What you can do instead is, if you have a partner or somebody or another organization or somebody that is something that this group of people would be interested in, you can share to that list information about that other group. And then, that's actually a great way for people to actually build lists. Like, let's say you work with a local business and you say like, hey, we'd love for you to check out what this business is doing. Or that business can say like, we really support this nonprofit. You should check out what they're doing. And that's a great way to send people who, again, are making that decision like, oh yeah, I want to learn more about that, and I'm really interested in that. And then taking that action to subscribe themselves to that list. And then that person, again, you have a much stronger connection with that person because they've made that decision to sign up. But you should never give that information out to anybody else, because they're entrusting you with it and they're expecting you to take care of it.
I'll tell you what, and I take a more greedy perspective. You earn someone's loyalty and trust and maybe dollars. That's the last thing I want to share, as an executive director. We teach, Dave, the importance of engaging board members. And I like to say, even if a board member doesn't ask for a gift, they can identify prospects, they can introduce their business and social contacts to the mission. Do any email marketing strategies pop up for board members?
Yeah, I mean, again, the big thing, we kind of mentioned this a little earlier when we were talking about just segmenting, right? Is you want to make sure that you're separating those board members out and you're sharing information that's relevant to them with them. So you're going to want to create a specific plan, and that's, gauging what it is that you're trying to do. Are you trying to make sure that these board members are more engaged and that they're doing these things for you? And then so you build a plan on how do you engage them to do those things, right? And that is going to be much different from the plan that again, you have for your donors, or the plan that you have for your patrons, if that's the case, right? And so you want to really think through who that group of people is and what it is that you're going to do. And so you have to do that. You have to make that a separate thing and a separate track of strategy that you're doing for them.
Okay, and we're gonna, before we move on to the wrap-up section, and by the way, John, you can interrupt if there are any questions from the audience.
But we do have one question here.
Okay.
From Melissa. She says, question for the guest, any email marketing tips for events, digital or in person?
That's a timely one.
Yeah, I love it. Melissa, thank you for the question. So yeah, I mean, this is a big one. And I think at the very least, what you should think about doing, and this goes for like just anything that you're trying to do, but when you're really promoting an event, right, you're thinking about, at the very least, an announcement, a reminder, and kind of like a last chance, right? So you want to think about it across at least that, so you can announce the event that you're having and you're giving the specific as to, why people would want to attend. You can remind people about the event, and then you can let them know that this is their last chance to kind of do something with it. And those are three separate messages that you could, depending on the nature of your event, right? Like particularly in the nonprofit space, you probably plan these out a lot longer in advance. But again, an example with the theater, I mentioned we used to send monthly, but leading up to a show, we would start to send more frequently, once a week. And so we would typically, how I would play that was, we would think about, all right, what is the date of the event? And I would go back, 7 to 8 weeks and say like, okay, over the course of 8 weeks, I'm going to send a new message to people. But it wasn't just like, come to the event. I was telling stories. It started with, our artistic director saying why they chose that show. And so it was an interview with them, and it was a way for them to get engaged with the story of why we were doing what we were doing. Then we would have a note from our executive director talking about something that's particular to this production. And so we would lead up to the point when a couple of weeks before we would say, hey, you should buy tickets to this event now, this event that we've been talking about and that you've been engaged in. We would have interviews with the actors and the cast and the set designers, all of these things leading up to that point. And so you have new information that engages people that you're sharing with them. And then leading up to when you're going to actually ask them to do the thing that you want them to do. And so that's how we would think about it. And so like I said, at the very least, think about at least 3 emails to let people know about your event, but you can do more if you can do it in a way that is engaging to the people receiving it.
That's a powerful word, is engaging. Hey,
Yeah.
before we move to our wrap-up section, what is your advice on that popular task of cleaning up your email list? What's your advice? Because boy, it is tough to see. People seem to be changing email every time they sneeze.
Yeah. So I think the big thing is, right, like, know that, like, try to set up some type of quarterly schedule is what we typically recommend with people. And that is to clean up any what we would call bounced emails, right? So emails that aren't actually getting delivered because they're going to either a non-existent email address, and a lot of times that happens because people change jobs, people move locations, like all of these things that that really have nothing to do with you or your organization, right? It's just basically based off the person and their particular email address. I think the other thing to do, this is more of a management piece than a cleanup piece, but take a look at your list and see the people that maybe aren't opening as frequently as everybody else, or they haven't
And
opened
by
in
the
a
way,
long
that's
time.
a feature of Constant Contact that I
Yeah.
love. I
Yeah, so
love that.
you can create segments of people based on how they engage with your emails and that type of thing. And really, I'm not saying this so you remove them, but what I'm saying is you do this so you treat them a little bit differently. So those might be people that aren't opening all the time and doing something, but they are seeing your messages. And so you might just send to them a little less frequently or treat them a little differently. But those people are still valuable, because I've heard numerous stories of, somebody not opening an email for the longest time or doing anything, but then out of the blue, I've had people on personal lists that I've had on for years that all of a sudden they're like, hey, I finally am ready to reach out to you and ask you about this thing, right? And so you just never know. And so it's good to have those people, but you might just want to treat them a little bit differently.
Yeah, yeah. So how about we move on to our wrap-up section
Sure thing.
and just go over some of the major points that we call this Jim's wrap-up. First of all, one of the things I probably write things too long, is to, you don't have to say everything in your single email. As you're saying, hopefully you're going to set a standard of expectations, and they're going to get email over time from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big key, right? Is like, you don't feel like you have to do everything in every email that you send. Think about what it is that you're trying to do, and sometimes that can be as simple as just setting the stage for an email you're going to send them that actually is going to have like a call to action in it, right? Is like, this is something that you should be thinking about that's really important. Wanted to make you aware of it. And then the next email is, I remember that thing I was telling you about. Here's how you can get involved in that. So it's telling that story over time for sure.
This is someone, about a month ago, I had Laura Fredericks, is probably, with the loss of Gerald Tanis, the most respected fundraising authority on the planet. And she was on our webinar, and she is really, all of a sudden we've gone from a business of face-to-face to virtual, and really begun to share some good research. But she's saying that your follow-up email is even more important when you're not there in person. And I love it. Again, she's in less is more type of category. And she likes going with a Z, which, takes you like in 3 different directions. Okay. Number 1, if you can try to keep it to 3 paragraphs, that first paragraph is about the reader, thanking them, recognizing them. Second paragraph is about the challenge, the problem that you're trying to solve. And the third is the call to action, which is typically asking for gifts of time and money. 3 paragraphs.
Yeah. So Jim, if you don't mind, I'll add something there. One of the things we often recommend to people too is, almost every email that you send is really about answering 3 questions for the receiver, right? It's about answering, what are you trying to accomplish? Why should the reader care? And how can they get involved? Right. And I think that follows nicely.
And that could be the Z here too, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And you were saying subject lines, less is more, and your wisdom in 30 seconds on subject lines.
Yeah, subject lines, just make sure, at the very least, fall back to what is in that email and point out why I should care about that, right? Why do I want to open that? Why do I want to open that email?
And you're big on putting the reader in control, and would you agree, probably at the end of the day, it's better you want both, but it's better probably to have a quality list over a quantity list.
Absolutely. There's no question in my mind. I would rather have 10 people on my list that are going to, be engaged and help me achieve the mission that I'm trying to achieve than 100 people that, where 90% of them aren't going to pay attention.
And you're big on the power of segmentation. You want to kind of review that for 1 minute?
Yeah, I think that this is just the big thing, right? Like, particularly now as you're fighting for attention, and there's so many different things that are competing for that attention, right? From devices to Netflix to friends on Facebook, whatever the case may be, you need to get information to people that is going to matter to them. And the only way you can really do that is by segmenting them and treating them as different people and not the same as everybody else. And so that's just a huge thing. Segment that so you can, not every message is for everyone, I guess, is the key message there.
But I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give the Dave Charest answer to this one. How long and how frequent should your emails? It depends. And they're really that, and probably it depends for an organization, can change over time and circumstances, but it truly does. Another thing, if you're going to hear anything from you, again, if you want the email opened and read and acted upon, it's hopefully someone that has told you they want to get your email.
Yep, yep. You got to put them in control of that. A simple way to think about that is there's a difference between saying, oh, I'm going to add you to my email list versus, oh, would you like to get on my email list about this cause that you're, and then just changing how you ask that question puts the person in control of whether or not, or making that decision, right? And so that's really important to consider as well.
I want to sum up a little to put this in the lens of fundraising. Dave, philanthropy is proved to be very resilient. We had someone from Giving USA on about 2 months ago, and she pointed out that actually philanthropy is responding more robustly now than it did to the recession of 08 and 09. And because of that, and it's not the number one predictor of philanthropy is the stock market, which has remained remarkably strong. I just read a report yesterday from FEP, the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, that giving for the first half of 2020 is 7.5% up over the first half of 2019. For the first quarter, it was 6% behind, but it's become people are giving, and here's a wonderful thing. People, donors of $250 or less are driving that surge. If you don't know what a DAF is, you better research it. It's a donor advised fund, and it represents just a huge and dynamic part of philanthropy. And it's not, we've seen billion-dollar gifts. These are two folks who made billion-dollar gifts that did not make anything remotely close to that before 2020. So we're saying, and by the way, this is where philanthropy comes from. We talked about $450 billion. 70% or so comes from individuals. So, I love foundation and corporations, but most of the money comes from individuals. We're talking about respect computer screen fatigue. People are being overwhelmed. 150,000 email every minute. So ask yourself, is it absolutely necessary for me to send that email? But if you do send it, you want to inspire donors about what their gift dollars will do. Okay, Dave, by the way, I give a money back guarantee here, and that is your chances of getting the gift go way up when you ask.
True story.
Yeah. By the way, John, before we go away, any last questions from the audience? And we're finishing up here.
Hey, Jim, we got a flurry of questions right before the end of the event. So
we'll take one last one. Okay, one last one.
All right. Here's one. We're a performing arts nonprofit that mostly works in the event realm. We do free tickets through Eventbrite and collect their information for purposes of grant and sponsor reporting. We make it clear that we're collecting their information, but would like to import them into our email list. You think it's best to put that question in there to join our list, or to do it automatically and just make them aware that they will be added to our email list?
I know what you're going to say, Dave, but go ahead and say it.
Well, so I like to think of it in a twofold manner, right? So I think, yeah, like I know what you think I'm going to say is like have them, ask them directly to join the list. And I think you can do that. Like obviously, unless you're getting permission, they're giving you permission to contact them. But typically people are giving you permission to contact them about the event, right? I think what you do is you follow up after the event or as they're making that, and you say like, hey, we give them a reason why they would want to join your email list to get regular updates from you. And I think that's the better way to do it.
I agree. By the way, we close. I'm a big fan of President Kennedy. Grew up at that time. And yeah, there's gray hair up here. These are words he spoke during the commencement address given at American University on June 10th, 1963. And I swear, Dave, they give me goosebumps. because I think he is speaking to us right now. He said that our most basic common link is that we all inhabit the small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future, and we're all mortal. I swear he's speaking to us right now. But I want to take this opportunity to thank our producer, John Largent. We are going to post a short written summary on LinkedIn and Facebook. And then John does a magic spin cycle and gets us back a recording and tape that John, somewhere around the 6 o'clock to 6:30 window that we will post on LinkedIn and Facebook. But I want to thank Dave. You and I had not met, and we discovered we have a lot of things in common, including favorite teams and backgrounds. But I want to say again, first, you've been a wonderful guest. And also, I'm saying I am not impartial. Constant Contact has been an essential part of my business life. And I feel I am treated like their most important customer in the world, which, by the way, as I teach fundraisers, you should treat every donor like the most important donor in the world. So please convey our appreciation, first to you personally, but to the entire Constant Contact family, because you all are a vital part of the infrastructure of the nonprofit sector.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Jim, and I definitely will bring that information back. And thank you for having me. I hope this was valuable to the people on the
very
line.
valuable.
And yeah, that's my goal, is to always, share what we can to help people, move forward and do better, particularly online. So thank you.
Well, listen, with the Charest family, stay safe, and we'll be seeing. And again, thank you. I'm a big Constant Contact fan. Thank you for the way you support nonprofits and small businesses, and stay safe. Thank you to our learning community. We'll see you next Wednesday. John,
Bye all.
thanks.
Thank you.